welcome. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to play roulette. Now, roulette's a pretty simple game, right? You bet on a number, spin the wheel, drop the ball in. And whatever it lands on is the winner. And pay out any bets. And that would be that. Well, it really is just about that simple. But there are actually quite a number of things that you can bet on. So I will go into detail about all of that. I like to start from the basics. I give you more info than you're going to get from just a quick 3-minute tutorial. I like to start from a place that doesn't assume you know anything about the game or maybe even much about gambling at all. So this is great if you're a beginner. If you're intimidated to go out and try it, I will break everything down for you. If you're an experienced gambler, there may be some repetition here for you, but I'm going to give you a nice clear look at how to play. I'll also talk to you about the differences between American and European roulette, and they're actually almost identical. But I'll also cover the additional rules and bets of French roulette. And then in my how-to videos like this, I focus on the gameplay mechanics rather than strategies. I leave that to other folks. I want to remind you that roulette is purely a game of chance. There's no skill that can influence the outcome of the wheel. But I am going to touch on a few betting strategies, which are ways to sort of regulate maybe your pace of play and your risk. But again, they don't change the outcome of the wheel at all. So remember that, know your limits, and always play responsibly. Lastly, in my Baccarat video, we talked a little bit about James Bond because things like Baccarat and roulette figure prominently in the books and movies, so I thought we'd revisit that a little bit around some of the betting strategies and things that are mentioned about roulette by Ian Fleming. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll take a look at the overall wheel and the game area here before we dive into the various bets. All right, let's get started. So first things first, let's be clear on the objective of the game. You as a player are going to place bets on what you think will come up on the wheel, what number the ball will land on. And if you guess correctly, you win. If not, you lose your bet. And that's really all there is to it. This is where we place bets. This is referred to as the layout. You can see it has numbers you can place bets on, as well as some additional categories that let you bet on larger groups of numbers. Many people are familiar with the idea that you might bet on a specific number, and have probably heard you can bet on red or black. But there are other options like even numbers or odd numbers or numbers in a column. I'm going to go deeply into all of that shortly. We'll also get a closer look at the board as we talk about that so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So, in general, if you bet on a specific number and win, that will be the highest payout on the game. If you bet on 2 numbers, your payout will be less, 4 numbers less. Basically, the broader net you cast, right? If you bet on red numbers, if you win, you only get 1 back. Whereas if you were to bet on an individual number and win, you would get 35 chips for doing so. So the broader the net you cast, the more likely your chance of winning, but as a result, the payout goes down significantly. Now let's have a look at the wheel itself to understand exactly what we're working with. All right, I will stop this so we can take a look. So on the roulette wheel, there are 38 spaces, 38 number slots where the ball can land. This is an American roulette wheel. In Europe, there are only 37, and I'm going to talk about that difference later on. We have 36 red and black numbers that range from 1 to 36. When you bet red or black or even or odd, you're betting on one of those. But there are 2 zeros on the board. On the wheel, we have 0 and 00, and those are green. Now this is critical to note because this is where the house edge factors in. If you bet on red or black, many people might assume that's a 50-50 bet, but it is not because there are 2 slots that are green. If our ball lands on one of the zeros, one of the green slots, if you bet red or black, you would lose. Obviously, if you bet any individual number, you would lose. If you bet even or odd in roulette, those also lose on 0. I'm going to talk about outside bets versus inside bets. Our outside bets are things like odd, even, red, black, 1 to 18, 19 to 36, the dozens, 1 through 12, 13 through 24, and these columns. All those bets lose on either 0. Now, of course, you are allowed to bet on 0 or 00 like any other number. So we have 2 zeros, 36 numbers, the numbers 1 to 36, and the wheel is spun. The ball will be spun opposite the direction that the wheel is spinning, and it must complete 3 revolutions before falling into a slot to be considered a valid spin. If it doesn't make those 3 trips around, have to be spun again. So whatever slot it falls into, your dealer or croupier is going to take the marker and place it on that to indicate which number landed on the wheel. And if we had chips out, any losing chips would be taken, and any winning bets would be paid out. Once those are paid out, the dealer will take the marker back. At that point, new bets may be made. A new spin will happen. And while the ball is rolling, at some point the dealer will say no more bets. That will happen before it drops, so you'll have to stop betting, but it usually happens while the ball is spinning. So we have a new number that would be marked, losing bets collected, and winning bets paid out. Losing bets collected, and then any winning bets paid out. Once all bets have been paid out, you can collect your winnings. The dealer will take the marker back, and the cycle begins anew. So a couple more details about the wheel. You'll see that we have the ball that I've been using. There's also one sitting on top of the wheel, and they're of different sizes. It's going to give them different physical properties for how they roll and fall. And casinos will switch those out, and this is to take away any remote chance of someone being able to predict physically where that ball might end up. It's complicated by using different balls. Similarly, you'll see that casinos tend to reverse the direction of the wheel with each spin. All right, 34, red. And again, this is to reduce any bias in the dealer, any bit of habit or pattern that might make the ball tend to land in a segment of the wheel more regularly. This is to keep you from gaming the system. Any descriptions of the rules just mark going one direction, and some casinos may do it that way. But you'll likely to see them changing direction just to minimize that bias. Before we get into betting, a couple other things to notice about the layout and the wheel here. See, the numbers are red and black. At the top of our layout here, we have the 0 and then the double 0. These are green. Then we start with our numbers, and on the layout, we go across in rows. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, going to the next row, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And there are a bunch of groupings on here that are going to help with your betting, which we'll look at. But I want to point out, initially, odds are red, and then you'll see when we get to 10, it switches. So then odds become black. Right? And that goes here through 18. And then when we get to 19, we're back to odd numbers being red. And that goes up through 28. And then for 29 through 36, odds are going to be black again. There's a lot of thought behind the layout, kind of disrupting people's patterns, and you might think about the arrangement on the wheel. So it's probably not obvious. They're certainly not in order around the wheel as a result. This layout also means the first column starts with 1 and goes up by 3. So in each column, the next number, we're incrementing by 3. Now, let's start looking at betting, and we'll give ourselves some chips to work with. And roulette is a bit unique when it comes to the chips that you're going to use. And it's for a very simple reason. As a player, when you buy in, you're going to get a stack of chips of the same color. You're not going to be used like the typical chips of different denominations that many of you might be familiar with something like Texas Hold'em poker. So you might be playing with these pink chips, and another player might be playing purple, right? And this makes it clear who's betting on what. I want to bet, say, 5 on 4, and you want to bet the split there. It's very hard to keep track of who put down what chip. So instead of using the typical denomination chips, you have your own color, and they're all of a fixed value. To make it easy for ourselves, let's just say they're all worth $1. So when you roll up to the roulette table, you're going to whip out your cash, and you will place it on the table, right? You and the dealer are never going to hand money hand to hand. Not going to do that with chips either, right? Because if you do, the eye in the sky will think you're up to funny business. And you don't want to be seen as being up to funny business. It's a good way to end up with your head in a vice and Joe Pesci asking you questions. So you'll put your money on the table, the dealer will take it, and they will give you a stack of chips. If we're using $1.20, you're going to get a stack of 20 chips, and that will be your color to play with. Let's say you're a well-educated roulette player and you want to do $100 worth. You'll put that on the table. The dealer will take that 100. And you will get 5 stacks of 20 chips each, and you will have 100 to play with. Now, you may be saying, hey, I want to play with larger value chips, and that is possible. When you whip out your Benjamin here, you could say, I want $5 chips. And in that case, your color is now going to represent $5 per chip. 20 at 5 is 100. So you'll get 20 chips, but you'll be playing with them as if their value is 5. And to indicate that, the dealer will take a chip of your color, is going to set it in the rack, and they'll put a small tag on it that's going to say 100, and that's going to indicate that your color stands for a different value. And the value indicated is the value of 20 chips. So the marker will say 100 because at $5, 20 chips are 100. So your chips would count for that value. So when you get to the roulette table, don't worry, the dealer will not be pocketing that money. When you get to the table, you will exchange for chips of a particular color, and then when you leave the table, you must exchange those back for money denomination chips. Don't leave the table with the roulette chips. It's like going to a foreign country. You gotta exchange your currency when you get there and then exchange it back on your way out. Alright? So now that we have some chips, let's get into betting in roulette. We have our layout here where you can bet on specific numbers. And then, as I've mentioned, there's some betting options outside of this number grid that you can also bet on that are larger collections of numbers. Okay? And I'm going to start there because these are pretty simple. These are called the outside bets. The outside bets, and these numbers are the inside bets. The inside bets and the outside bets. Outside bets have lower payouts, cover larger groups of numbers. We'll start there for simplicity, and then we'll dive in and take a real close look at the various inside bets, okay? So, let's start with the lowest payout options. So you can bet on red or black, red or black, and if you win those bets, if it comes up red, or in this case we've bet on black, per the advice of passenger 57, if that ball comes up on a black number, these pay even money, which is 1 to 1. You put one chip down, the dealer would mark, and then they will pay you your one chip. Okay? Similarly, you could bet on even numbers or odd numbers. Right? If I bet on even, came up 15, I would lose because that's an odd number. If I had bet on odd, again 1 to 1, I would get one chip for my bet on odds. There is one other option here. You can bet the first half of the numbers or the second half. And these are called low and high. Low, you would bet on 1 to 18, any number from 1 to 18. And remember, all outside bets lose. 0 or 00 comes up. You could bet on low or high, 19 to 36. Again, 1 for 1 payout if you win. So, high, low, even, odd, red and black. The next set of options are the dozens. This next set, these pay 2 to 1 instead of 1 to 1. You can bet on the first 12, 1 through 12, the second 12, which is 13, through 24, of course the third 12, 25 through 36. If any of the numbers in that group of 12 land, then you're going to get 2 chips for that win. The other option at 2 to 1 in our outside bets are column bets. So you can bet first column 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, 16, and so forth. The second column, which is 2, 5, 8, 11, or third column, any number in this column is going to pay you 2 to 1. Any number in the column that you have bet on will pay out at 2 to 1. So when you bet on half the numbers, excluding 0, you're getting 1 to 1 odds. When you bet on divisions, a third of the total numbers, so the first, second, or third dozens, or these columns of 12, any of the numbers in the column pay 2 to 1. So those are the outside bets. They're quite straightforward. They give you a lot of coverage, and of course you can place as many bets as you are inclined to. You'll see people put out a lot of chips, typically in roulette, to cover the wheel as however they like to do. But the outside bets, pretty straightforward. Big coverage, low payout. So let's now dive into all of our inside bet options. And let's use a different view here so I can show you with a little closer view of the layout here. All right, let's do it. So we looked at our outside bets, the even money bets, low and high, even and odd, red and black, the dozens, and the column bets. Now let's look at inside. And outside we kind of went lower payout, higher payout. Here we'll start with an individual number, kind of go higher payout to lower payout. So for even money bets, you place a chip and you would get a 1 to 1 payout. Betting on, say, a dozen, that is going to give you a 2 to 1 payout like we talked about. Now if you bet on a single number, say, I think 16 will come up, or 5, say 8. If 8 comes up, you get a 35 to 1 payout. So you bet one chip, and you have 35 chips coming your way. So very high payout, but obviously pretty low chance of guessing a single number, right? The wheel comes up 8, you get your 35 chips, right? So you can place bets that cover more and more numbers. Let's say you want to cover 2 numbers, say 7 and 10, or 13 and 14. Any 2 numbers vertically or horizontally adjacent, you place the chip on the line between the 2 numbers. This is a bet on 13 and 16. This is a bet on 19 and 20. You want to make sure you place the chip clearly on the table so there's no ambiguity, right? Is this a straight up bet on 20 or a split bet on 19 or 20? Make sure you place it so it is clear. And if it is unclear, the dealer is likely to correct it while the ball is spinning to make sure there's no confusion. But if we make a split bet, that is going to pay out 17 to 1. If either the 4 or 5 hits in my bet here, I'm getting 17 chips. Okay? So that's betting on 2 numbers. We can bet on 3 numbers. And the way I can do this is I can bet on a row, which is called a street, or people may call it a line. But if I think 19, 20, and 21 are my numbers, I can place the chip here on this edge. And if any of these 3 numbers come up, 19, 20, or 21, I will receive an 11 to 1 payout. I would get 11 chips if either of 19, 20, or 21 were to come up. Similarly, I can bet on 4 numbers by betting a square of numbers. So I could bet 14, 15, 17, and 18 by placing a chip at the intersection where their corners meet. This bet applies to all 4 of these numbers, 14, 15, 17, and 18. If any of those 4 numbers come up, 8 to 1 payout. Right? So you're betting on fewer numbers than the outside bets, and you're getting higher payouts, just less chance of landing those specific numbers. There is another way to bet 3, but I'm going to cover the bets involving 0 in just a moment. So next up, you can bet on 6 numbers. And this is done by betting 2 streets, effectively a double street, as you might imagine. Place it on this edge, right in between the 2 streets that I'm betting on. And this gives me a 6-number coverage. In my example, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. If any of those numbers hit, it is a 5 to 1 payout. So 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, or 30, any of those came up, I would get 5 chips for my 1 chip bet. Right? There is a way to bet 5, and we're going to talk about that up here. It's very specific. So high and low, also 1 to 1. Red and black, also 1 to 1. We have the dozens all pay out at 2 to 1. And our columns at 2 to 1 as well. And you can see that printed on this sheet as well. Right, so those are the various payouts we have. Now let's talk about 0 and double 0. So we have a couple special things there. Remember, you can bet straight up on either 0 or double 0. Like any straight up bet, this will pay 35 to 1 if that number comes up. But if 0 were to come up, all of these other bets would lose. So that pays 35 to 1. You can split them. You can also split with the 1, 2, or 3. So if 0 or 1 came up, you'd have a 17 chip payout for the split. And you see there's also a trio bet here. 0, 1, and 2, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0, 2, 3. So some different ways to make 3. Remember, on the numbers portion, we can bet on streets. And so this trio, it has the same payout of 11 to 1. It's just going to be one of these bets involving 0. It's not a typical street. There is one last bet, which is called the basket bet. And this is a 5-number bet, our only 5-number bet. Obviously, this can't exist on a European table that only has one 0 option, so only in the American version. There are some roulette games that have a third 0. Do not ever play those. All that is doing is increasing the house advantage. No benefit to you. Avoid those. I don't normally give prescriptive advice, but that is bad news. The basket bet pays out 6 to 1. However, I will caution you, the odds are not in your favor on this bet, and this is not a smart bet. So just know that. So these are all the permutations of inside bets. We also have our outside bets. So ways you can bet on various numbers, from betting on a single number, 2 numbers with the split, 3 with the street or trio bet, 4 with a square bet, 6 with the double street bet. Then there is the 5 bet option with the basket bet. And then groups of 12 numbers or 18 numbers for the even bets. So those are the inside bets. One tiny note, sometimes casinos have convenience bets because this is a larger table. Maybe it's hard to reach something like the 0, double 0 split. There's other locations you could place those that represent that. However, be sure to double check at your casino, because if they don't play those rules, you may be placing a bet in an ambiguous or misleading position. So just want to make you aware of that, because you'll probably see that, but you should understand the casino's specific rules for that. All right, so these are your betting options in roulette. This gives you what you need to know to make decisions about where you would want to place your bets based on their likelihood and the payouts. Now that you understand how to bet, I want to cover table minimums and maximums very quickly. These are going to vary casino by casino, so definitely check where you're playing what the min and max might be. And the reason I wanted to touch on this is with roulette, the minimum and maximum may vary based on what you are betting on. So it might be that there is a $10 minimum on outside bets and a $10 minimum on inside bets. So let's grab 10 chips here. Let's make sure. 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we have a $10 minimum on outside bets, that means we need to put down 10 chips to, bet on low numbers, for instance. That makes sense. I think that's pretty straightforward. Now when it comes to a $10 minimum inside, what that will mean is that you have to put down at least 10 on inside bets if you're making an inside bet. You can't bet just 1 on a number. You can't put down 5 on a split. But as long as you put in 10 total, you're good. So you could bet on all these numbers and I have 10 chips down, I'm good. I could bet on splits and double street and individual numbers. It's basically any combination of options of inside bets totaling the minimum of 10. Okay. Maximums are likely to be described in a similar way, where there be maximums based on where you are betting. So it might be, say, $5,000 on any of the even money bets, a $2,500 max on any of the 2-to-1 payout outside bets, and say a $200 max on inside bets. Right, so again, this is something you need to verify with the casino where you are playing. But just note that those mins and maxes may vary based on whether you're doing inside bets or outside bets. Right? Let's do some examples of play now that you're familiar with how the game works. We'll just throw some chips out there, not with any particular strategy. Do some spins of the wheel, and you can just see how things play out. All right, let's get some bets on the table. I'm just going to be random here. I'm not trying to do anything too specific. Just get a variety of chips on the table. And let's get another column bet here. And so if you want to bet on the same option as another player, it's fine to just stack. This is the value of having different colored chips. Alright, so let's go ahead and do our spin here. No more bets. Alright, so we have a green 0. Right? So, in terms of all the bets that have been made, all outside bets have been lost. All these number bets have been lost. No one bet on the 0, so they're actually all losing bets. So the dealer, croupier, is going to gather all of the losing chips. They'll go into a pile and get sorted. It's called mucking. A lot of casinos, there'll be a second dealer who will do the mucking. Other places, your dealer might muck the chips. Okay, so move the marker. We had no winning bets that time. We'll go ahead and get a new set of bets out. All right, and let's go ahead and spin again. No more bets. All right. 21 red. So now again, clear away all of the losing bets. Right, so we had all three players win in some form. We'll pay out from outside to in. So if we're betting on red, we pay 1-1. Bet on high numbers. Pink did. That also pays 1-1. And for the column bet for white, pays 2-1. Now we have this double street bet, which pays 5-1. 5 for pink. And then we had a square bet on these 4 numbers from white, which will pay 8-1. There we go. So these have been paid out. Players can collect their winnings and take the marker, and we can move on to our next round. So you see, players may cover the number in different ways and give payouts for each of those options. Okay? Overall, it's pretty simple once you see how it works. One note, let's say you've got players larger stacks. The dealer may break those down into stacks of 5 and offset them for clarity on the amount bet, so you might see that. I have switched the layout here so we can discuss European roulette. There's one very small change, is really all it comes down to. Very small, seemingly, but with notable consequences for the player and house. I'm also going to talk about French roulette, so I have a French roulette styled layout here. We'll cover these additional bets in a little bit, but we'll focus on this part of the layout. It should look familiar to you. The high and low, even odd, red and black columns, and this has the dozens over here on this side, but all the same outside bets, all the same inside bets, and our big change, we only have 1 0. I don't have a European wheel, but I'll show you an example. It is laid out differently, still the numbers 1 to 36, but only 1 0. It doesn't have the green double 0. This cuts the casino's edge in half. So if you're a player faced with a choice between an American and a European layout, you should absolutely be playing the European layout because it has better odds for you. Otherwise, all the bets are the same. The game is played in the exact same way. just have a different layout on the wheel, one more favorable to the player. Now I said all the bets are the same, and that is not exactly true. Because we don't have the 2 zeros up here, it does change the 0 bets. So you can make trio bets, but you don't get splitting the zeros. You don't have the 5 number basket bet, which is a bad bet anyway. But you can still bet on 0. You just have slightly different options without that second double 0. All right? So French roulette also uses that single 0, but includes some additional betting options as well as some tweaks to the even money bets. And to talk about all of that, I'm going to switch this to a more close-up view so you can get a look at this layout, and we'll cover how all those things work. So here we're looking at the French roulette layout. In terms of gameplay overall, it is just like European roulette, that you have a single 0. You have all of the same inside and outside betting options. So across the American and European games, these are the same. You just get differences with the 0 bets. Of course, at a French table, you're likely to see these in French, and it's not uncommon to have betting options on either side of the layout versus the single side in the American layout. So in terms of overall play, not many differences. We're going to have one rule difference on the even money bets, and then we're going to look at some of the additional betting options on this racetrack on the layout, which is a depiction of the French or European wheel. This is how that wheel is laid out. Single 0. And these are your number placements. So this is a linear look at the numbers. This is how they're actually arrayed on the wheel. And there's some bets here that are basically convenience bets, and I'm going to talk about those in just a moment. They're really not complicated. They're just sort of preset betting options, but I will break it all down. So there is a notable rule difference when it comes to even money bets in the French game. So let's go ahead and place a bet, and remember our even money bets are the low and high, even or odd, and then red or black, even, odd, low, high, low, odd, even, black, red. Right, they're even money for if you bet 1 unit here, you'll get 1 unit back if you win. However, in French roulette, let's go ahead and enter a bet of 10. Let's say we'll put this on even. If you win, you'd get 10 as a result of this even money, 1-to-1. If you lose in the American game or the standard European game, the dealer would take all of those chips and you'd lose them. However, with a rule that's called la partage, you only lose half of what you've staked if you lose on the even money bet. So I bet 10, I lose 5. So this is more favorable to the player. You're roughly having your losses. So it's definitely more generous and takes away some of what the casino is going to get. Now, there is another form of this called en prison, in prison, if you will, where instead of taking half of your wager, if you lose this bet, the dealer is going to put a marker on it saying that these are in prison. These are now perpetrators. And what that means is it stays there. You can't touch it. The bank doesn't collect it, but you don't get to take it back either. And on the next spin of the wheel, if, in this case, you get even, those will be released from prison and you get the money you staked back. If, however, you lose again, comes up odd, then you're going to lose the full stack. So, pretty equivalent to La Partage, where you lose half, where you kind of get two spins at it. So effectively, again, almost having your overall losses. So these are rules that are more favorable to the player. You don't necessarily lose your whole stake immediately in French roulette. Now, these are ascribed to the French roulette game, but there are some casinos elsewhere that use either the La Partage or en prison. I have no idea how to pronounce French, so this is going to be an exciting segment for you all if you're familiar with the language. Some casinos elsewhere may use that rule, so again, as always, make sure you understand the rules of where you're playing. Okay, now that we understand the different rules around even money bets, again, low or high, even or odd, red or black, even or odd, and low or high. Let's take a look at what are called sector bets and also neighbor bets. And we say that because they're based specifically on the arrangements of the numbers on the wheel. And as I said, these are basically preset bets that the dealer and the players understand exactly what you're betting on, and they're going to relate to segments of the wheel, the numbers associated with that bet. But there are different ways the bet is placed on those numbers, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So let's start with a simple option, which is the neighbors bet. And this is where you're going to bet on a number on the wheel, and you're also betting on the numbers next to it. Players do this who might like to target a number but want to kind of cover numbers on either side of it. They don't feel like they just missed out. But it's basically a fast and efficient way to bet on some adjacent numbers. So let's grab some chips here, and I have 5. The most typical form of the bet is going to involve betting on a number and 2 neighbors on either side of it. Let's use 9 for our example. We'd be saying I'm betting on 9, 22, and 18, as well as 31 and 14. 2 neighbors is customary. There are options to bet on 1 neighbor, so you'd only be betting on 3 numbers, or 3 neighbors, you'd bet on 7 numbers, and you could ask for those. Typically those are going to be online, where you'll have an option for how many neighbors you want to include in your bet. Again, this is typically 2 neighbors. Now, one notable thing about these neighbors' bets and these sectors' bets is they are announced bets. You as a player are not placing these. What you're going to do is ask the croupier here in France to place that bet for you. Some people say they're called bets. There's some slightly different terminology, technically announced, but you're going to say, dealer, I would like to place bet on the neighbors of 9, and you'll give them the appropriate number of chips. And the croupier or dealer places that bet for you, will pay it out accordingly. So because we're betting on 5 numbers, the typical neighbor's bet is a 5-chip bet. If you were just doing single neighbors, it would be a 3-chip bet. Because under the hood, what are we doing? We are placing a straight up bet on each of the numbers that we are targeting. Right, so our stack of 5 is going to be apportioned in that manner. And so typically you're going to have it here on the target number, and if 18, 22, 9, 31, or 14 comes up, you're going to get 35 paid out to you because they are straight up bets paying at 35 to 1. So you would lose 4, keep this 1 that was the winning number, and get 35 additional chips. Okay? It's quite straightforward. And this is exactly equivalent. If you make a neighbor's bet on 9, 2 adjoining neighbors, this is exactly the same as if you bet straight up on 9, straight up on 22, straight up on 18, straight up on 31, and straight up on 14. So you could place this bet yourself. Conceptually, you could place a neighbor's bet in American roulette simply by doing that. All this is a convenience to do that rather than identifying each number where it is on the wheel and finding it on this layout. So it's just a preset form of bet that is understood and makes it easy to do that. Right? Again, it is exactly equivalent to those straight up bets. So these sector bets are similar in that they're targeting a set of numbers that are grouped on the wheel. So let's start with voisins de 0, the neighbors of 0. So it's going to be targeting the numbers that are around 0 on the wheel. You see for this, it actually shows you on this racetrack layout all the numbers involved, that demarcation. Okay? And the thing with sector bets is that while the bets involve all of these numbers, and you're going to win something if any of these numbers hit, the nature of that bet and what the payout is going to be will vary, because under the hood there's different types of bets being placed. So let's look at exactly what the bets are when you place a voisins de 0 bet. For this bet, you need 9 units, because what this is saying is place 9 bets for me involving these numbers. Again, it is preset. It's always the same. So where does it start? We take 2, and these are bet on the trio of 0, 2, and 3. Again, so when you make this bet, you'll give the croupier 9 chips for voisins de 0, the neighbors of 0, and that will be your bet. But this is identical to placing this bet on the layout, where we bet 2 on the 0, 2, 3 trio, a split on the 4 to 7. The trio bet, like a street, pays 11 to 1, split 17 to 1. We split 4, 7. We place a split on 12, 15. We place a split on 18 and 21. Place a split on 19 and 22. And then we do a square corner bet 25 through 29. 25, 26, 28, 29. And for this, it is 2 chips bet on that square. And then lastly, one more split on 32 and 35. So this is the neighbors of 0 bet. When you ask for this, this is what you are doing. You're placing a trio bet of 2 on 0 to 3, a split on 4 to 7, split on 12 and 15, split on 18 and 21, split on 19 and 22, square bet 25 to 29, and then a split on 32 and 35. So if any of these numbers come up, you will win based on that specific bet. So if the wheel lands on 3, you'll have won this trio bet, which pays out at 11 to 1. You bid 2 chips, so you would receive 22, and you would lose these other chips. Similarly, if 18 came up, you would get the split payout of 17 for the 1 chip you have wagered on that split. So this is kind of just like a simple way of placing these specific bets that cover some various parts of the table. You see it's all of these numbers, but the underlying bets have different payout odds depending on the specifics. The 11 to 1, the trio, the 17 to 1 of the split, of course the 8 to 1 of the square bet here. So again, fairly simple once you understand what is being asked for. Now let's go to the kind of roughly opposite side of the wheel for the tiers du cylindre, or thirds of the cylinder. And you can see that's going to involve these numbers here. And in terms of the bet, this one is more straightforward because all of these are split bets. That means any of these numbers come up on the wheel, you're going to receive 17 back if you're betting 1 chip for each of the splits. So this is a 6-unit bet. So in this case, we're betting 1 chip on each split. If you put down 12 chips, 6 units, that would be 2 chips per split. Right, so it splits 5 and 8, 10 and 11, 13 and 16, 23 and 24, 27 and 30, and lastly, 33 and 36. So each of these numbers covered by a split bet payout is 17 units for any of these numbers that were to come up. All right. So next up we have the orphelins bet, or the orphans, basically the numbers that are not in these 2 other bets. And this is a 5-unit bet. for the most common variant, which is orphelins and cheval. There is also a bet called orphelins en plain, which is an 8-chip bet. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So the orphans bet, orphelins en cheval, is a 5-unit bet using a 1-chip value for my unit. So we'll use 5 chips. You would ask the croupier for orphelins 5, and what you would be betting on, you bet on 1 straight up. So this has a 35-unit payout, and then the remaining 4 are splits. So we split 6, 9, 14, and 17, 17 and 20. So 17 is covered twice in the orphans bet. And lastly, a split of 31 and 34. So 1 bet straight up on 1, split bets on 6 and 9, 14 and 17, 17 and 20, 17 repeated, and 31 and 34. Now, the alternative, right, this is our 5-chip bet. There is an 8-chip or 8-unit orphelins bet, orphelins en plain, and this uses the same numbers but makes just a straight up bet on all of them. So on the 1, 6, 9, the 14, 17, 20, 31, and 34. So any of the numbers, the orphans numbers comes up, you'll get 35. So if the wheel came up 31, you would lose these, but you would get 35 chips for the 31 winning. Okay? Again, the standard orphans bet is the 5-chip bet. That has the 1 straight up and the other numbers split. A couple more betting options to mention. There is a bet called the 0 game. It is not marked on my layout here. It's called jeu 0 in French. And this is a split on 0, 3, a split on 12 and 15, a straight up bet on 26, and then a split on 32 and 35. So you see it's kind of a neighboring bet of 0. We get the 4 here and 2 on this side of the 0. And you can see this is what it looks like. Split on 0, 3, split on 12, 15, straight up on 26, and a split on 32, 35. Splits will pay 17 to 1, and if you hit on 26, that would be a 35 to 1 payout. Those are the sector bets. There are a couple other bets to mention. One is called a final bet or finale en plain, and this is when you bet on numbers that end in the same number winning. So if you wanted to bet on all numbers that end in 1, right, 1, 11, 21, and 31, it's a 4-chip bet. So we have 4 numbers, and we are betting straight up on those numbers. Again, This is something you can do on your own. Just bet straight up on 1, 11, 21, and 31. If you chose something like 8, there are fewer instances. So it is a 3-chip bet. We bet on 8, 18, and 28. Again, straight up bets, paying at 35. Okay? There is also a variant where you can bet on, say, numbers that end in 1 and 4, and it's just adding more to your bet accordingly. The last bet to discuss is the complete or sometimes maximum bet, and it's saying basically give me every bet, every inside bet possible on a number, say 14, and it's going to be a bet that covers all of the various permutations of inside bets involving that number. It's just a fast way to do that rather than hitting all of the individual bets that touch that number. So that is the complete bet. I won't break that down fully here, but you may hear that said. All right, so those are the sector bets, neighbors bets, and the special rules of la partage or in prison for the even money bets in French roulette. Now, as I stated up front, I don't like to talk about strategies in these videos. I focus on the mechanics, but in this video I'm going to present a few strategies which are really methods to kind of limit your risk and pace of play, maybe take some of the emotions out of betting that can cost you big. None of these guarantee results. And partly I want to bring them up because you'll see a lot of videos that say, results guaranteed, 98% successful. Well, that 2% is a pretty big deal with your money on the line. But like I said, these are ways to mitigate risk and give you a structure to your betting so you're not maybe chasing luck that isn't there. The important thing to remember with any casino game or roulette is that the house advantage is real and it is designed to make you lose money over time. It's like water traveling over rock. Just no matter what, over time, eventually it's going to erode a canyon out of that rock, and that canyon is your wallet. So play responsibly. Recognize this is about having fun. Just know your limits and what you're getting into. Okay. So the strategies we're going to look at focus basically on one of the even bets, because these have a consistent set of odds that are generally the best in your favor on the table. And really what it's about is how much money you're putting down on each subsequent spin of the wheel. And with these strategies, when you're evaluating them, think about what they offer. Some might be fun and exciting, but potentially risk losing you a lot of money. Others might be complicated. You could lose track. You could run afoul of table limits in terms of getting them to pay off. So definitely evaluate those different aspects if you're thinking about adopting one of these. They all are, and I'm going to consider them as being on a simple bet, one of the even money bets. You could do red or black or even odd. And it's going to be about how much you bet on each subsequent spin of the wheel, all right? We'll start with martingale, which is a commonly discussed strategy. This, you have an increment of your bet, let's just say 1. If you win, good. You're going to bet 1 again, all right? If you lose, you double your bet. So now you're going to bet 2. If you win, go back to betting 1, right? If you bet 2 and lose, next time you'll bet 4. Anytime you win, go back to your original unit. And the idea here is that even if you lose, you're putting more in, so when you do get the win, you're kind of making that money back. It sounds good. One of the big challenges with this one is if you keep doing it and you keep losing, you may eventually hit the table max, and then you can't follow through on this approach, and you can't win your money back, and you're in trouble. The next one is basically a reverse martingale, also called paroli. And it's like it sounds. Instead of doubling your bet after a loss, you double your bet after a win. So if it comes up red, I'm going to get my 1, and this time instead of betting 1, on the next spin, I bet 2. If I win again, I'm going to have earned 2 chips for that bet. This time I'm doubling, and now I bet 4. If I win a third time, for my third bet, I will bet 8. So after 3 wins, reset back to 1. After any loss, also go back to your original unit, in our case, 1. So the reason people do this is this one capitalizes. If you get a winning streak going, you kind of get a little bit more out of it. But again, no guarantees. All right, I've grabbed pen and paper because now things get more complicated and you'll need to track. Up next, Fibonacci. So this is based off of the Fibonacci sequence. Right. And to create a Fibonacci sequence, we add the last 2 numbers in our sequence together. Start with 1, 1. Add that up, it becomes 2. Add the previous 2, 2 and 1, 3. Then we add 3 and 2 to get 5. 5 and 3 is 8. 8 and 5, 13. And that's how we build out our Fibonacci sequence. Now, what you're going to bet is your unit value, whatever denomination you're going to want to bet. You multiply it by the number of the sequence. We're going to use a unit value of 1. We multiply everything in our sequence by 1, so we're just going to use the number. So we start with 1. If we lose, we go to the next number in the sequence. Starting out, we're again going to bet 1. If we lose again, we're going to bet 2. Now, if we lose again, we step forward, we're going to bet 3. If we win, we go 2 steps back. So then we'll be back to betting 1. If we lose, then we bet 2, and so on. Kind of moving forward and back through this sequence. So this requires that you keep track of a Fibonacci sequence. They're on paper or in your head, and you remember where you are in that sequence and move your bets accordingly. It's a little more smooth overall than martingale, but obviously pretty complicated to think about. Is the person you're trying to seduce at the table going to be impressed by you whipping out a Fibonacci sequence? Maybe they will, maybe they won't. What is impressive? Being smart with your gambling money. Up next, the D'Alembert system, which is similar to the other ones, where this one, unlike the previous one, is more simple to track. Say we start with 1. If we lose our next bet, we increase our value, so we do 2. And if we win, we take off 1 increment. If we bet 2, we lose, Then we bet 3. If we win, the next time round, we're going to be betting 2. Just increase by 1 unit if you lose, decrease by 1 unit if you win. So this one's not too aggressive, but if you get on a losing streak, it's a challenge. It's vulnerable to the gambler's fallacy, right? That the odds are going to even out over time, which is not necessarily true. May not happen until your money is long run out. Our next one is, again, a little bit more complicated and requires you to track some values. Now, this is the Labouchere system. We're going to write down the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we have the numbers 1 through 5. And what we're going to bet is the sum of the first and last numbers on the list. 1 and 5 in our case. So we need to bet 6 chips. So if we win, we cross out the top and bottom number on the list. So now when we go to bet, the sum of the first and last number, so again we're betting 6. This time if we lose, anytime you lose, you add the amount that you bet to the bottom of the list. So we add 6 to the bottom of our list, okay? This is not a straightforward system. Now we bet the amount, the sum, the first and last numbers on the list that are not crossed out. So now we have 2 and 6. And so we're going to bet 8. So we'd get 8 chips down for our bet. Right? If we would win, we'd cross out the 2 and the 6. But if we lose, we add 8 to our list. And now our next bet is going to be 10. So the idea is that eventually you might win a couple times in succession and cross off all the numbers on your list. If you have only one uncrossed number, bet that value. And so at that point, you could have won a certain amount and walk away. You can see, if you keep losing, the amounts you're going for just get bigger and bigger. So could be very dangerous. Obviously, that one has the drawback of requiring some pretty complicated bookkeeping at the table to understand where you're at in the betting process. So those are some different strategies. I want to talk about one more related to James Bond, just because we looked a bit at some James Bond stuff in the Baccarat video, and it'd be fun to revisit that here a little bit. Ian Fleming has some descriptions around Bond playing, and we have a betting strategy associated with that. So I have the book Casino Royale here, and he opens it with quite a descriptive quote about casinos. The scent and smoke and sweat of a casino are nauseating at 3 in the morning. Then the soul erosion produced by high gambling, a compost of greed and fear and nervous tension, becomes unbearable. The senses awake and revolt from it. Yeah, so quite a statement, but I think you can identify if you've been at a casino late at night. So he also has a quick description saying Mr. Bond increased his winnings to exactly 3 million over the 2 days. He was playing a progressive system on red at table 5. So it doesn't specify which, but he's doing one of the systems we talked about, perhaps a martingale or similar, where he's focusing on red and increasing or decreasing his bet amount based on the winnings. We get one other word of note, recognizing the fallacies and sense of sort of believing that there's going to be a certain playing out of numbers on the wheel. And even though Bond calls out that is not true, he admits that he is vulnerable when he's checking a history of what the wheel has spun that day. It was obvious that all this ritual and all the mechanical minutiae of the wheel, of the numbered slots and the cylinder, had been devised and perfected over the years, so that neither the skill of the croupier nor any bias in the wheel could affect the fall of the ball. And yet it is a convention among roulette players, and Bond rigidly adhered to it, to take careful note of the past history of each session, and to be guided by any peculiarities in the run of the wheel. Bond didn't defend the practice. He simply maintained that the more effort and ingenuity you put into gambling, the more you took out. So yes, our hero can dodge the odds, but that's not how the casino designs things. But it's easy to fall into that trap. There is one other associated betting strategy that kind of gets tagged James Bond, and I believe this is actually something that Ian Fleming himself said he used rather than being in the Bond books. I'd have to double check the sources on that, but I believe that is correct. And this functions more like those orphans bets, the neighbors of zero, and it's kind of like a pre-programmed set of things to bet on. So what is indicated is a 14 chip bet on even. So that goes on even, and then five on the 13 through 18 double street, depending on these 6 numbers. Where this pays out 5 to 1. This is even money. And then 1 straight up on 0. And if it were to land on that 0, that would be 35 to 1 in payout. So note, Bond is almost assuredly referring to a European roulette table, so not exactly what we're looking at here. But that has been called a James Bond betting strategy, but I think it was a preference Ian Fleming had. Again, it's kind of like a set of things that you like to cover, which many roulette players have their preferences for. And one quick note there, we talked about those different strategies, but you can also just bet the same amount every time. Keep things simple, maybe a little boring, but keep you playing for a while, potentially. Again, all these structures are to help pace your play, to take some of the emotions out of it that could really get you in trouble. Remember, the house still has the edge, so take that into account. Alright, so that has been a look at roulette. Remember, it's not a game of skill like poker or blackjack. You can't take actions that influence the outcome of the wheel. All you can do is choose how to bet. The wider net you cast, the lower your payout, the more likely it is to hit. Betting on smaller groups of numbers or a single number pays out more, but less likely to land. So any skill is in how you manage your money and pace of play. Please don't forget that the house odds are rigged against you, so over time the casino is going to win. But hopefully if you understand what you're in for, how the game works, you can enjoy yourself. As always, play responsibly, and I hope you have a wonderful night.